The following program contains adult language, poor taste in jokes, racial slurs, political slurs, slants, and all sorts of things that, if you are sensitive and have a delicate constitution, you should probably go watch Teletubbies. You were warned.
Hey kids, welcome back to Roto Talk.
Hey kids, welcome back. Beautiful overcast Saturday, but the water is really calm. It's so tempting to go out there and run a boat. But it's like 30 degrees out and I just can't be bothered. So I figured we would do the sides of the cracker build. Okay, but first, my gorgeous smoking hot wife is a professional photographer, as you may know, or may not. And so she makes me do pictures for everything. And so we go downstairs in her studio. The whole downstairs is like a big, another living room. We have a couple living rooms in the house. And up here in Lake Country, we get spiders like mad. So there's these drapes down there with the sliding glass doors that look out to the lake, and there's these drapes, and there's like this little black shadow, and she's making me do pictures for our anniversary that's coming up. So we're doing this little photo shoot down there, and she goes, I said, well, where do you want me to look? You know, I'm holding her and doing all that crap, and she goes, focus on that dot on our white drapes. She goes, what the hell is that? And I'm looking at it, and I'm like, that can't be good. So it was on the back side of the drape, and she goes, oh, I think it's a cricket, because we have lots of insects. But when you're in lake territory, northern Indiana, it's nothing but spiders. And I flipped this thing around, and look what I found. Tell me. He's a big dude. So I had to take him across to my cousin's field. It was funny. But anyway, ended that pretty quick. So I'm going to show you how I do sides of most of the boats. I'm going to show you the right way, and I'm going to show you my way. There is a difference. It's a little scary.
It's not as if she were a maniac, a raving thing.
But I don't know. It just depends. I've had people say they really like it, but really what you'll do is you'll apply epoxy all along this edge, all along the bulkheads, okay? And then you'll clamp the crap out of it and work on it really fast. So, hang on. I can't handle the music. All right, so, and that's usually what people do is they'll put epoxy everywhere. You'll dry fit it first, of course. Always dry fit your stuff. I'm going to do an angle here. Okay? As usual, just like the other cracker build, you want a little bit above, this edge a little bit above, this edge a little bit below, a little bit of overhang here, and a little bit of overhang here. Okay? Otherwise, bad things will happen. Okay? So what you would do is do a dry fit. Let's see here. Try and get it so you can see it. Just a little bit of overhang there, and I'm going to use my fingers to kind of feel where that's at. Got plenty there. Okay. And then you could probably put another one. And you guys have seen me do dry fits on builds before. This is not new. Okay, just like that. And then obviously we'll do the same thing with the bottom. Put a couple light clamps. You do not want to deform the rails. Okay? The chimes. If you hear cracking, that's a bad day at the zoo. You do not want that. That's when it gets scary. Alright, so there we go. Now, I already did the other side off camera. So there's a nice dry fit. Then what you would do is as you add clamps, mark it. Mark it here, mark it there. And dry fit the whole thing. Take it off. Put on your 30 weight, your 30-minute epoxy. Doom, 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 knock it out. Clamp the living hell out of it with a zillion clamps. It's not how I do it. Now, first thing, before I forget, I'm going to mark this here. That's a good starting place. All right. First thing you need to do before you even get to this point, grab your roto twister, have yourself a drink. Okay? Sailor J. All right. You're going to take your sanding block, and I already did this off camera. You're going to take your sanding block, and you're going to sand along this edge, and you want those bulkheads. See that? You want those bulkheads to be flush along the chines. And this boat, you don't have a hell of a lot of sanding to do. It's not like the SS. The SS, there's a lot more sanding. This one, you can just do a sanding block, get away with it pretty good. So you hear that, it's like, oh, something's sticking out. So I'll tweak that in a little bit more. And that'll give you nice binding surface. Now, here's the pros and cons to doing it my way versus the right way. And I'm not saying you should follow the manual. Like I said, Uncle Joe puts a lot of time into those manuals. Follow them. So if you want to glue, put your epoxy on all the bulkheads and do that gig, great. I don't do it that way. Certain boats I do, like hydroplanes, it's a little different. Or the other way you could do it, and you've heard me say this before, which I don't do this, is you could laminate this entire thing with 30-minute epoxy, clamp the shit out of it. That's even better, because you got to seal it anyway. I don't do it that way. What I do, and I'm just going to do a quickie mock-up here. Okay, just like that. What I'll do is I'll clamp this in place in this back half. This is just a mock-up. Let's try that again. Okay, make sure you got a little bit above, a little bit below. Just like that. Okay. Don't do it this way. Go clamp, 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 clamp. Don't clamp the ends and then work into the middle. You'll end up with a bubble. So you want to go clamp, 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 clamp. Okay? Then, this is mock-up. So then what I'll do is I will literally take CA glue and I'll put it along this. Make sure that you have no gap there. You'd have a lot more clamps. Okay? And then I would literally, let's see, we can go ahead and do this one. Let's make sure we're going to, and wrap it around the whole boat. Make sure you're going to have that gap everywhere you need, above and below. Yeah. Now I'm going to put this one here just for holding purposes. Okay. That was kind of a stupid thing to say. Aren't all clamps for holding purposes? That's funny. Alright, so we're going to make sure we don't got no ripple. Got some good grammar on you. Ain't got no bad ripple. You ever have ripple? That shit'll tear your gut up. That's that booze you buy for like 3 cents a ton. Need to get some lighter clamps on this. Sorry. Okay, little hint. See how these clamps, the feet move? That right there, that gap is for a straight edge. Just like that. All right. Double check before you do this. Make sure you're going to wrap all the way around. Okay? And I'm just going to glue my CA. Make sure there's no gaps in here. This is how I do it. Now, this is actually, believe it or not, thin CA. This stuff is awful. But this is really good for this purpose. Watch how drippy it is. Let me grab a, here. Watch this. See that? That is thin crap. But the nice thing about it is it'll soak right into those seams for something like this. And it has crap for strength. Absolutely terrible strength. Which is good, because if you screw up, you can pop it right off. Medium, it actually holds much, much stronger. Okay? Now what I can do is I can clamp here. Again, same exact principle. Make sure you have no gappage. And I'm only going to go back up to that spot. perfect. Okay. Might use this one here. Now, I know this might seem strange. This is a lot less stressful than trying to get all your glue on. And now I just run some CA, and I let it soak in before I even hit it with activator. Just let it soak, let it dry. This shit dries much faster than medium. Cures, I should say. Let it soak for a sec. Now, with thin CA, you can actually spray this on first, then put your CA on. Just, it won't sink in as deep, so a difference. And I let that cook for a couple minutes. Then I literally take the clamps off, and I do the other half, okay? Now, here's a couple problems with my way of doing it. It is much, much faster. Okay. This turns your build that would normally take 2 weeks. I mean, I build crackers in usually a day, maybe 2, 3 with paint. But there's a reason it goes that fast. It's not because I rush. This process here, if you're putting 30-minute epoxy on and using a zillion clamps on one side, you go through all this rigmarole, you put the 30-minute on there, you wait 3 hours at least, rinse and repeat on the other side. I can do this in 10 minutes. And then once it cures, I'll let it cure for about 40 minutes. Done. We could literally sand this down, throw the bottom on tonight too, if we wanted to. Now, but what I do, instead of putting glue along this edge, I actually glue a fillet inside, along here, and up the bulkheads, and up along this edge. Okay, now, if you're building for sheer weight and speed, you're trying to save every single ounce, don't build it this way. I end up using a little bit more epoxy, probably twice as much to be honest, but I do thin it. And I use a very thin mixture of epoxy, but I literally seal the bulkheads with a fillet, the sides with a fillet here, and it's pretty quick to do. Once the CA glue has set, I just zip, 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 done. I do thin it out a little bit so the epoxy really penetrates. I use a 10-minute epoxy, not 30, but since I thin it, it's very, the viscosity is much, much thinner, and it soaks into the wood. If you don't, word of warning, if you don't get this fillet, this good seal along these edges right here, water gets in there, these are bare edges because you sanded them, they're going to rot, okay? Now, take that with a grain of salt because you're going to seal the entire interior anyway, so chances are good you're going to be totally fine. But my way builds your boat much, much faster and much, much stronger. I've never calculated the extra weight. It does weigh more, but I mean, a cracker box is only going to go up 60 miles an hour before it flips anyway, so I could care less. Hydroplanes, I don't do this way. But a fillet glue joint is going to be much stronger than just putting little bits of epoxy along these tiny edges and gluing the sides on. I've wrecked cracker boxes where I've stood on them to break them, and I weigh 240 pounds and literally could not get it down. Okay? So then that's what I'm going to do is I'm just going to rinse and repeat, and I'm going to CA glue the rest of this down, and then I'll come back and we'll epoxy it. Be right back. We're done. Everything's tacked. Now, I usually do leave a couple clamps on the nose just because that's the strongest gradient. Okay? But you can see no clamps. All CA. Okay? Now, the nice thing is when you have a boat like this, a kit like this, you've got this gutter, if you will, this edge up here. So I just lay that CA glue right in there because it's a real bitch to try to get your activator underneath here to spray. I just lay it on top, the glue, because the CA, because you're going to be sanding it off anyway. We have to sand this edge off. That CA glue sands off faster than the wood does, so that's handy. So I put the CA glue down on this top edge of the I guess it would be technically the bottom edge of the top shear, and I put it on the bottom edge of the bottom shear, and then you can get in there with your hands and shoot this. Now what we're going to do, I am going to use 30 weight. I used 10 on the other side. It doesn't matter. I did thin it first, but since this is the last thing I'm doing with this boat today, excuse me, I'm not in any hurry. So what we're going to do is we're going to brush all of this. I'm going to start here because I do the nose special, because I can reach with a normal brush all the way, okay, until here. Then I bend the brush like that. These things suck. Here's a trick. Take a dull dike and give it an extra crimp. Delouse it a little bit. That way it doesn't pop out. So we're going to use that for the nose. And we'll recrimp this one too, because these things are just spit out of China. I mean, it's... There we go, okay? So I'm going to start my epoxying process right here. Okay? I'm going to do between bulkheads, up and down, along the vertical edge of the bulkhead. This seam, bottom seam. Move on. Up and down bulkhead, up, bottom, along the bulkhead. Okay? It is very hard to see. Now, doing the other side, what you really should do is I should rotate this whole jig around. It's much easier to see what you're doing, which I think I will. Work smarter, not harder. So let's flip this guy. This is why I build them on movable jigs. If you bolt it down onto your table, it's a real bitch. Okay, so I'm just going to start at the back. We're going to go ahead and vertical seam. We're going to do all that good stuff there. So take one of our nice silicone cups. We're going to take some 30 weight, and then we're going to thin this. I just don't see the need to have it this thick. Now, again, if you're not used to mixing epoxy, please measure it correctly. But even if it's off a little bit, it's not going to be the end of the world. It might take a little bit longer to cure. It might cure a little bit faster. That's denatured alcohol. Grab yourself a popsicle stick. We're going to mix this up. Nice thing about these big cups now is if I mix up a lot of epoxy, I don't have to worry about spilling it over. Okay. So thinning it does a couple things. Thinning it helps it absorb into the wood better because the viscosity is just thinner, and it stretches your epoxy. You can put less is more, right? We can go farther with it. You'll see a huge difference when you don't thin epoxy, how far you can stretch it versus the other way around. So, ooh, I have a gap there. I must have missed it with my CA. It's all right. No harm done. Okay. Okay. Let's do the same thing. Now, I usually do some reinforcement after this is cured and after we get the bottom on and after we cut it off the fixture. When I'm doing my sealing, when I seal everything, I reinforce certain joints. Something I've always done. Okay? See how fast this goes? Very quick. And since I thinned it, it's actually going to absorb deeper into the wood because it's thinner. Putting alcohol in it doesn't really... It really doesn't change the... let's see, I think I needed a clamp there too. It doesn't really change how fast it cures. If it does, I've never noticed it. Where was that? It's right there. There's certain parts right where I put the clamps that missed a little bit of the CA. But it's real easy to see. When you brush your epoxy in, you can see it ooze out. And if you see it ooze out, you got a gap. That's bad math. You don't want that. Very simple, very fast process. I'm going to take this brush, ditch it. We're going to take our V brush. Hopefully you guys can see this. And we're going to go above. That nose is super important, okay? Because it's the hardest to get to, but it has the deepest bend. So I literally take a brush and jam it in there. And I usually also reinforce the nose after you cut it and take it off of the jig. I will literally take a little bit of epoxy and pour it in the nose, just a tiny little bit, make that sucker solid, and that's it. We're done. No clamps, hardly. Okay, look, still have a lot of epoxy left too. So you could double check your joints, make sure you didn't miss anything. No biggie. Okay, and I will do a little bit of stuffing. Stuff the turkey. Stick a little bit more in that nose. You got it, might as well use it. Alright. Take some of that denatured, clean off your hands. Okay, and that's it. Sides are done, son. And in about 2 hours, you could probably take those clamps off. Usually 30 minutes, usually 3 hours for total cure time. But these sides are nice and tight, no problem. So the next step we're going to do is we're going to take our plane and we're going to plane down this top edge where it's high. This high bits. Yeah. And then we're going to sand this. We're going to put a slight bevel on the keel. And we're going to sand everything nice, and we're going to pop down those the bottoms. It's going to be a fast build. It really is. We'll slap a really nice, cool paint job on it, and then probably hang it from the ceiling, because I don't think we're putting guts in it until one of my other ones gets destroyed, because I don't need 3 Vboxes. So, till the next time, kids, if you have any questions, let me know. Shout out to the guys in the chat group. If you want to join our little chat group that we have, it's in the description. We have a good time. Keep your eyesight up, kids. Bye.
Rage hard.
It's life.
Rage hard.
Doing it right. Doing it right.
Rage hard.
Against the dark.
Rage hard.
Make your mark. Let the tournament begin. Don't give up and don't give in. Strength to rise, rather strength to win. Strength to save the world from losing.